The mystery of D.B. Cooper, a man who jumped from a plane in 1971 with $200,000 of stolen cash, is the only case of air piracy to have never been solved in the United States. But now pieces of the hijacker's parachute have been found in Washington, the case's first and most major pieces of real evidence since 1980. The parachute pinpoints Cooper's last known whereabouts before he disappeared. But author Thomas Colbert has claimed to know who Cooper is for years, and he's got decoded letters from the criminal to prove it. All fingers point to former CIA agent Robert Rackstraw, but the FBI might be trying to cover up the agent's involvement with the notorious crime. The mystery began on November 24, 1971, when a man referring to himself as D.B. Cooper bought a one-way plane ticket from Portland to Seattle. Once on board the flight, he slipped the flight attendant a threatening note. It claimed that he had a bomb and that her and all the plane's passengers were now his hostages. He said he would free them if they complied with all his demands. He wanted $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a refueling truck waiting for them when they landed in Seattle. Once in Seattle, Cooper had other plans for the flight. He let the hostages off, but ordered the plane to fly towards Mexico. But it never got there. Instead, somewhere over southwest Washington, Cooper jumped out of the back of a plane with the money and parachutes. The plane returned to the airport, but D.B. Cooper was never seen from again. The only verifiable piece of evidence ever found near the scene of D.B. Cooper's grand escape was a small cache of $20 bills found near the Columbia River in 1980, which may have been dropped on purpose to throw off authorities and make them think that Cooper hadn't survived the jump. In 2016, the FBI officially closed the investigation, saying they would only open it again if they found money or Cooper's parachute. But filmmaker and author Thomas Colbert and his team of 40 retired FBI agents who have been independently investigating D.B. Cooper since 2011 refused to let the case be completely closed without discovering the truth of Cooper's identity. They've uncovered new pieces of physical evidence on a 200-acre tree farm in the northwestern United States. The pieces found were a plastic strap and 2 pieces of foam thought to belong to a parachute. The discovery was made thanks to a tip from a pilot who claimed to have spoken with one of the people who helped D.B. Cooper escape. According to his story, after months of planning, 3 accomplices used a small plane and vehicle to pick Cooper up from his drop location. The spot where the parachute was found matches where the pilot says Cooper landed, leading Colbert and his team to believe that the story of accomplices is also true. With the money and 4 parachutes that Cooper took from the plane, he and his team were thought to have taken off to the Bahamas shortly after landing, where they likely stashed or spent the stolen money. Any physical evidence of the pieces of parachute are likely long gone, but Thomas Colbert had claimed to know the true identity of D.B. Cooper for years. The mysterious hijacker's real name is Robert Rackstraw. The Californian man is a Vietnam veteran, former Special Forces paratrooper, explosives expert, and pilot who's believed to have been an ex-CIA agent. It's believed that he used over 22 different aliases during his lifetime. Rackstraw was once a person of interest in the case, but he was officially eliminated as a suspect by the FBI in 1979. When the FBI declared Rackstraw no longer a person of interest, several agents anonymously went to the press to say otherwise, suggesting that the FBI wasn't unanimous in its belief that Rackstraw couldn't have been the culprit. But why would the FBI bother covering up a case involving a retired agent? Colbert believes that it's to protect information more than it is to protect one of their own. If Rackstraw was part of the CIA, that means he has knowledge of classified info. Colbert calls the cover-up an old-fashioned scandal, claiming that many of his 40-plus case leads or pieces of evidence have been largely ignored by the FBI, even though they've told him they would investigate. It was his hope that finding more physical evidence would lead the FBI to reopen the case and that public interest would force them to make the details public. But why is Colbert so sure that Rackstraw is the man to blame? Well, the proof is in a series of 6 coded letters sent to Cooper by various newspapers in the months following the hijacking. The FBI refused to release the 5th and 6th letter to the public until Colbert sued for the release of the case file under the Freedom of Information Act. After gaining access to the files, Colbert became even more certain that the FBI were trying to cover something up. Colbert claims that both letters contain coded messages and they point directly at Robert Rackstraw. To decode the messages, Colbert enlisted the help of Rick Sherwood, a former member of the Army Security Agency. Rackstraw had actually served under Sherwood in 2 classified units, so Sherwood believed that if Rackstraw had written the letters, he would easily be able to decode them. Sherwood, who was responsible for decoding signals during the Vietnam War, immediately saw the connection between Rackstraw's writing style and the letters. The letters were typewritten, but it was not the physical writing that tipped him off. Rather, it was the type of alphanumeric coding the letters used, as well as the personality of the person who wrote them. Sherwood thought that the odd letter and number combinations were very similar to the type of coded message that Rackstraw would have written. Sherwood spent weeks decoding the letters. The fifth letter had a series of seemingly random letters and numbers at the bottom, which Sherwood noticed corresponded to 3 specialized army units. After some investigation, Sherwood discovered that Robert Rackstraw was the only man in the whole country to have served in all 3 of these units. But the most damning pieces of evidence were contained to the 6th letter, in which Sherwood claims that Rackstraw takes full responsibility for the crime by using his real name. The 6th and final letter was sent to Portland's Oregonian newspaper on March 28, 1972. It claimed that D.B. Cooper was still alive and had just returned to the United States from the Bahamas. Thomas Colbert calls the piece of evidence the icing on the cake of the entire Cooper case. Sherwood said, "I noticed he kept on repeating words in his sentence and thought he had code in there somewhere. He was taunting like he normally does, and I thought his name was going to be in it." And sure enough, the numbers added up perfectly. The writer was definitely taunting authorities and the public. Parts of the letter said, "So your silly troopers up there can stop looking for me. This is just how done the government is. I like your articles about me, but you can stop them now. D.B. Cooper is not real." The first truly suspicious sentence was, "I want out of the system and saw a way through good old Unc." Using alphanumeric codes that Rackstraw would have known, Sherwood decoded the term Unc used in the message, which likely refers to Uncle Sam. The term Unc was repeated a few times, and Sherwood thought its use here was particularly suspicious. After decoding the message, it reads, "I want out of the system and saw a way by skyjacking a jet plane." But the next decoded sentence was the one that without a doubt pointed to Rackstraw as the culprit. One original sentence read, "And please tell the lackey cops D.B. Cooper is not my real name." Sherwood noticed that the term lackey was used more than once and recognized it as a numbered code. He also noticed that the writer claimed that D.B. Cooper was not real multiple times, which led to Sherwood to believe that the criminal's real name was hidden somewhere in the letter, and that he was trying to secretly take credit for the hijacking. After decoding, the sentence reads, "I am First Lieutenant Robert Rackstraw. D.B. Cooper is not my real name." While the letters proved to Colbert and Sherwood that Rackstraw was definitely the real identity of the notorious D.B. Cooper, there was one important aspect missing: physical evidence. The letters didn't have fingerprints or watermarks to confirm their legitimate connection to Cooper and his crime. The final 2 letters were stranger than the first 4, with the FBI claiming that it may not have been the real D.B. Cooper who sent them to the newspapers. It could have been a copycat trying to join the media circus, but Sherwood and Colbert still believed that the specific army units and code used could have belonged to none other than Robert Rackstraw. So what was the accused Robert Rackstraw's response to these claims? Well, he did not confirm or deny his involvement. He simply told reporters to verify Colbert's facts. It's Sherwood's belief that Rackstraw's pride keeps him from claiming he didn't do the crime, which is why his response to accusations have been deliberately vague, even though he claimed that the independent investigation into D.B. Cooper's case has ruined his life. At this point, there's still no physical evidence tying Rackstraw to the case, but the discovery of the letters and the pieces of parachute that corroborate the pilot's story of D.B. Cooper's daring escape are the first big breaks in the case since 1980. They suggest that the case of the most terrifying air piracy crime in American history is finally cracked. Thomas Colbert and Rick Sherwood have closed their investigation of the case for now, but they hope that the FBI will use the physical evidence provided to continue to crack the case until Robert Rackstraw is officially tied to the crime. But with Rackstraw in his late 70s, it's possible that this case will go down in history as one that's been functionally, but not officially solved. The last big question to tackle is whether or not the FBI knows more about Rackstraw's involvement, or if they have no more evidence than Colbert and his team, but have chosen to not look further into the case in order to protect classified information. To Thomas Colbert, his mission has been accomplished. The case is finally cracked, and he sleeps well knowing that Rackstraw has been tied to the crime, even if he has yet to see official justice for his actions. But the case still leaves a lot of unanswered questions. Where's the $200,000? Was part of it buried like stories have claimed, or has Rackstraw spent it all by now? Who were D.B. Cooper's mysterious accomplices, and are they still at large today? And finally, is the FBI truly covering up connections to Rackstraw, and will they continue to do so? These questions might never be answered, but now that the FBI has Cooper's parachute in hand and a drop location, it's possible that this won't be the end of D.B. Cooper and his criminal legacy that's mystified America for decades. Do you think the D.B. Cooper case has been solved? Do you think that he had accomplices helping him? And will we ever know who they were?